Good afternoon, everybody. This is Stone Gasman live from New York City, and we are going to do a audio commentary for Three Young Texans, a movie that came out in 1954, distributed by 20th Century Fox, and from Panoramic Pic Productions, which we'll talk about as well. Now, this is the fifth in a series of commentaries that I'm doing honoring Mitzi Gaynor and her 92nd birthday yesterday. And I finished South Pacific. I actually got through South Pacific. I'm so grateful I did. And it was a great journey. It was a wonderful, wonderful journey. But now we're going to start marking off some of her lesser known titles, some of the more lesser and obscure ones. Like Sunday, we did Down Among the Sheltering Palms, which only has 3 reviews on IMDb. Well, guess what? This one, Three Young Texans, only has 7. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. This is let's go ahead and get started here and knock this out. But yeah, so I am paused on the Panoramic Productions Presents title card with the shot of the gorgeous sky and the prairie right there. So on the count of 3, 2, 1, and play. Got rid of the music there, and there's Mitzi Gaynor on horseback. Little different change of pace for her. Keith Brazel. Now, one thing I really like about this movie is the fact that they introduced the Three Young Texans with their own card, and they're in motion and everything. So I mean, granted, this film was probably meant for more of a younger audience, maybe like pre-teenagers, that kind of thing. And it's like, hey, these are the Three Young Texans. Okay. So, but this is a interesting film in it's an interesting film in Mitzi's filmography. In terms of film history, it's completely insignificant. The thing is that the Western, while it was a staple in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, by the time of the 60s, the Western had basically died. It had grown out of favor with audiences. And granted, there were, still Westerns made. I mean, movies like Little Big Man, stuff like that. But for the most part, the genre had died basically in the early 70s. And in fact, Three Young Texans, this movie is so obscure that it hasn't even been shown on television since 1977. How about that, huh? So, but this movie is a little bit odd in that it was basically, this is not really a 20th Century Fox production, although it was distributed by 20th Century Fox. The story goes is that there was a big cut in production at the studio as it was moving towards an all CinemaScope production schedule, which left many of its contract directors, writers, and actors idle. Fox arranged to lend these contractees to Leonard Goldstein and his newly formed Panoramic Pictures in return for a release agreement. This was one of several pictures financed by Fox, but made at the RKO Pathé studio that resulted from the agreement. But it was also shot largely on location in Durango, California. Colorado. Yeah, Durango, Colorado. Excuse me. It was shot in California too, because that RKO Pathé studio is in Culver City. But no, this is all Durango, Colorado. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And as a result, it's never been released on physical media. And really, the only way you could watch it is online. Now, I'm watching the version that's been uploaded to YouTube, courtesy of Arizona Western Movies. Credit to them. And I saw this about 5 years ago when I was going through all of Mitzi's movies. And this was her 8th film. And it was her 8th film at Fox as well. If you count South Pacific, I know that's more of more of a Magna film than a Fox film, but I'm still going to count it. But yeah, this is her 8th movie for the studio, and basically, she was basically sent over to Panoramic Productions to film this movie, even after doing almost nothing but musical dance movies, musical comedies, musical dance movies. I mean, My Blue Heaven, Bloodhounds on Broadway. I mean, the I Don't Care Girl. I mean, these were all movies. Golden Girl. They all played to her strengths, which were fantastic. I mean, she was the total package, the triple threat. She could sing, she could dance, and she was gorgeous. Absolutely the triple threat. And so she became a star at a very, very young age. I mean, Golden Girl in 1951 basically was her first starring vehicle for the studio. And then she started making movies like Bloodhounds on Broadway, and they put her in a couple of, like they put her in an anthology movie, which did not require singing and dancing. But this one, yeah, I mean, I'm actually surprised like they don't have her like sing in the saloon or something like that. But maybe I don't know if this was at Mitzi's request. I mean, because you got to remember this was after she had done 8 films at the studio. This was her 8th one, excuse me. And I would think that I mean, she would want a little bit a few perks here and there at that point. I mean, but at the same time, I mean, maybe she was just happy to take a vacation to Colorado and not have to sing and dance for one picture. And I mean, like I said, this is a B film. It's a B Western. I mean, and I'm sure if I asked her what her experience was like on this film, she would probably say, well, I got to, shoot a gun and I got to ride a horse, and, and hey, look, she looks great on the horse. There's no question. I mean, this movie's chief asset is without a doubt the color cinematography. I mean, Leonard Doss, who had worked on many Fox pictures, and he, of course, went on to do South Pacific with Mitzi. I mean, that is this movie's chief asset, because you got to understand a lot of those Westerns, a good majority, I can't throw out a number, but a good majority of them were all shot in black and white. It was economical. That was just the way it was done back then. But by 1960, black and white had pretty much altogether phased out by that time. I mean, like I said, 20th Century Fox was actually doing cuts so they could go towards these massive CinemaScope productions, like Mitzi's next movie, which will be Irving Berlin's There's No Business Like Show Business, which would be her last film for the studio up until South Pacific. But that is this movie's chief asset. And that's the thing. It also gives this movie a leg up over the zillions of other Westerns that came out at the time. I mean, they all utilize the same, plot threads and character motivations, and, the whole idea of bank robberies and train holdups and, saloon shenanigans, all this stuff. I mean, it was in every Western. It was in every Western, and, all the black and white Westerns, I mean, they could almost be Xerox copies of each other. They basically, and there's nothing that stands out from them aside from a few. Mitzi was really cute right there. But I mean, aside from like, actors, familiar faces that went on to bigger things. And a lot of those Westerns are actually long gone. I mean, the studios, they didn't preserve these things. I mean, and here again, by 1970, I mean, I remember I did a commentary for Night of the Lepus, which is a MGM film with Janet Leigh. And yeah, I mean, they utilized a lot of Western stars for that, because it was set in a Western town, I mean, these giant bunnies, terrorizing the town, like in a 50s science fiction film. But yeah, I mean, they said by the early 70s, like, I mean, that there was no more Western shows on television, and they dominated the 60s. I mean, Bonanza, stuff like that, Virginia City. I mean, Wanted Dead or Alive, the movie that shot Steve McQueen to stardom. I mean, it was just a staple. And then, like the drive-ins, they all completely disappeared. And And that's what I'm saying is that Three Young Texans, while insignificant, it does at the very least have splendid color cinematography. Now, this is obviously not a remastered, redone print, but at the same time, it's acceptable under the circumstances. And we are coming up on 9 minutes of Three Young Texans. And I was going to mention real quick that with Panoramic Productions, they only had 12 films that they made. Gorilla at Large, Siege at Red River, Man in the Attic, Princess of the Nile, White Feather, The Raid, Rapture, The Gambler from Natchez, The Rocket Man, Up from the Beach, A Life in the Balance, and finally Three Young Texans, all of which, only 12 films. They only did 12 films, and this is, it may not be the best of them because I'm looking at the scores right here, and only like one of them has over a 7.0 score, and that would be Rapture from 1965, directed by John Guillermin and starring Melvin Douglas, Patricia Ghazi, and Dean Stockwell. That's the only one that actually has an above average rating over at IMDb. And see, and this is the type of movie that you would go to like a matinee on like a rainy Sunday afternoon just to get out of the rain, just to watch something. And here's the thing: I'm watching these movies from the perspective is that let's say I was, let's just say I was a teenager or a young adult in the 50s, and I had become a massive Mitzi Gaynor fan, and I've been looking forward to all her movies and watching them and everything. And I would watch this one, and I'd be like, okay, I'm just glad to see her smile and be in color. I mean, what more could you ask for? That being said, she kind of disappears. I mean, she's technically the lead. She's top billed in Three Young Texans, but I don't think she's in more than half of the movie. In all honesty, I mean, a lot of the other actors, and there's two key familiar faces that we're going to talk about that you'll eventually recognize. One of whom is sitting at the table here. But there's only two of them. I mean, the rest of them, I have no idea. I mean, they're all, character actors. I mean, a lot of them probably did Westerns, and, they already did a zillion of these. But I'll give you all a chance, for maybe half of the movie to try to recognize these guys. I mean, there's only two of them that, like I said, have gone on to significant things. Although one of them died very young. Very sad. But yeah, I mean, in pretty much everything I've seen in on the Fox DVDs and everything, I mean, Mitzi doesn't even mention this movie, and I don't. I have no idea why that is. I mean, she might have even forgotten about it by now. It's altogether possible, but this stands out in her filmography, for better or for worse. She didn't really do any other Western films. She never really, went outside the song and dance genre very, very much, except for maybe, a domestic drama here, a romantic comedy here. A sorority college movie. I mean, stuff like that. But she never did any like horror films or any like, action movies. This is as close as it gets of her actually, and here again, I don't know if it was just because she wanted to do it or if the studio was like, hey, I mean, here's something for you. Here you go, knock this out. Well, we need to fill this quota. We need to make these movies, and they probably, of course, asked her, like, hey, do you want to ride a horse? I mean, do you want to shoot a gun? And and all that. I got to admit, when I'm looking at this movie right now, looking at the card playing and the coins and everything. I mean, This is not an ideal print, obviously, but look, I mean, it's still vivid enough that I'm, invested in what's going on, even though we've seen all this before in, a zillion other westerns. Somebody, somebody's a cheating. All right, time to go. So, what is this movie about? So, what is the plot of this movie? And I'm just going to read from the YouTube thing here, but uh, it's a couple of cowboys, Johnny Colt and Tony Ballou, excuse me. Both have a romantic interest in tomboy Rusty Blair, who wouldn't. While working for her father, Tony loses his wages gambling, then borrows money from Johnny and wins $700, which they intend to put toward a ranch of their own. They have a dream. Johnny's nervous because his father, Jim, is also a gambler. Of course. Jim goes to Mexico, gets drunk, catches a man named McAdoo cheating at cards, then shoots him in self-defense. McAdoo's two associates, Couture and Joe, decide to blackmail Jim into helping them rob a train of its $50,000 in payroll loot. If he refuses, they'll tell the law Jim shot their friend in cold blood. To help his father, Johnny robs the train first. He hides the money with the $700. A posse is formed, which Johnny joins to go search for a thief who is actually himself. Yeah, so that's not the entire plot, but I'm throwing out the gist of everything that's going to move along here. But let's go ahead and start talking about some of these actors real quick. And like I said, the two familiar ones, there's only two that I think would be familiar to any audience today. There's only two of them outside of Mitzi Gaynor, but I'm gonna leave them to be last while we go over the other ones. Now the gentleman here with the hat and the mustache. This is a gentleman by the name of Michael Ansara as Apache Joe. He was born in 1922, passed in 2013 at the age of 91. Lived all the way to 91. He played Cochise in the television series Broken Arrow from 56 to 58, Kane in the 79 to 81 series Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, Commander Kang in Star Trek, the original series, and yes, we will be going back to Star Trek, and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Deputy U.S. Marshal Sam Buckhart in the NBC series Law of the Plainsman, and provided the voice for Mr. Freeze in the DC animated universe. And Ansara received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame as well. During the 50s, he appeared in several episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. He appeared in an episode of The Lone Ranger in 1951 entitled Trouble at Black Rock. In 1953, the year before Three Young Texans, he appeared as Pindaris in Joseph Mankiewicz's big screen adaptation Julius Caesar with Marlon Brando, James Mason, and John Gielgud. However, the popular television series Broken Arrow, wherein he played the lead role of Cochise, raised Ansara's profile and made him a household name. While making the series, the 20th Century Fox publicity department arranged a date between Ansara and actress Barbara Eden, better known as I Dream of Jeannie. The two later married, and Ansara guest starred on Eden's sitcom I Dream of Jeannie as the Blue Djinn. He also played King Kamehameha in the Genie episode The Battle of Waikiki. In the final season, he played Major Biff Jellicoe in the episode My Sister the Homewrecker. Okay. Ansara and Eden divorced in 1974. The couple had one son. He also starred in the ABC TV series Law of the Plainsman with Gina Gillespie and Robert Harland. Ansara also played in biblical epics such as The Robe, the Ten Commandments, The Greatest Story Ever Told, and Slaves of Babylon, released by Columbia in 1953. In 1961, Ansara played the role of Miguel Alvarez in the film Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, co-starring with Barbara Eden and Walter Pidgeon. And he did a lot more television work. I'm not going to go over all of it. Oh, in 1992, he voiced Mr. Freeze in Batman the Animated Series and won critical acclaim for his performance. He went on to voice Mr. Freeze in the animated film Batman and Mr. Freeze Sub-Zero, one episode each of the new Batman Adventures and Batman Beyond, and the video game Batman Vengeance. In 1994, Ansara portrayed the techno-mage Elric in the Babylon 5 episode The Geometry of Shadows. And he is one of 9 actors to play the same character, in this case, the Klingon Commander Kang, on 3 different Star Trek series: the original series, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. He was nominated for the Saturn Award and won a Western Heritage Award for Rawhide. On February 8th, 1960, Ansara received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And some of his other films include Kim, where he was uncredited, The Golden Hawk, Witch Doctor, Princess of the Nile, Abbott and Costello Meet the Mummy, The Tall Stranger, Dear Dead Delilah, The Finks, It's Alive, the classic Larry Cohen movie. And his last movie was in 1999, The Long Road Home, where he actually starred in it. It was a television film. It also had a Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and the film tells the story of a city boy's life after having to live with his grandparents in a village after his parents' death. All right. Yep. So time for the train robbery. You know, what's amazing is that every time I see a train robbery in a movie, I just think of the 1903 film, The Great Train Robbery. I mean, it's almost, it's almost impossible now for any train robbery in a movie to, live up to that. Famously inspired the shot in Goodfellas. So most of the audience for this movie was basically like pre-teenagers, going to something, that's not very complicated, and so they can like get out of the rain or go on a date, that kind of thing. This wasn't exactly. I don't think this was taken seriously by newspaper critics back in the 50s. But here again, I mean, like I said, the one ace up its sleeve is the cinematography. It's the one ace up its sleeve. And here again, that is significant in terms of, in terms of the fact that so many Westerns back then were black and white. So this does stick out from the crowd, even though it's still a typical Western. Now, there's only 7 reviews at IMDb. I was going to look them over here real quick. And believe me, I got to fill up 74 minutes somehow. Because like I said, I mean, there's... well, actually, you know what? Let's do this instead. Let's talk about who came up with this story and who wrote the script, and go from there. Because for some weird reason that the writers, the story and the screenwriter, they both have their full names, including their middle name, credited. That's odd. I've never seen that before. But the story of Three Young Texans is courtesy of a man named William McLeod Rain, a British-born American novelist who wrote fictional adventure stories about the American Old West. And he was born in 1871, and Three Young Texans came out on January 16th, 1954 by Fox. And William Rain passed away approximately 6 months later in July. So this was obviously the last thing that he, was associated with, pretty much. He was born in London, the son of William and Jessie Rain. He published short stories when he was writing for the Rocky Mountain News in Denver, eventually becoming a full-time freelance fiction writer and finding his literary home in the novel. His earliest novels were romantic histories taking place in the English countryside. However, after spending some time with the Arizona Rangers, Rain shifted his literary focus and began to utilize the American West as a setting. The publication of Wyoming in 1908 marks the beginning of his prolific career, during which time he averaged nearly 2 Western novels a year until his death in 1954. In 1920, he was awarded an ML degree from the University of Colorado, where he had established that school's first journalism course. Oh. During the First World War, 500,000 copies of one of his books were sent to British soldiers in the trenches. 20 of his novels have been filmed. Though he was prolific, he was a slow, careful, conscientious worker, intent on accurate detail, and considered himself a craftsman rather than an artist. In 1905, Rain married Jenny P. Langley, who died in 1922. In 1924, he married Florence A. Hollingsworth, and they had a daughter. Though he traveled a good deal, Denver was considered his home. In 1928, he ghostwrote Billy Breckinridge, the book Hell Dorado, Bringing Law to the Mesquite. Breckinridge had been a deputy sheriff under Johnny Behan in Tombstone, Arizona territory during the period of the gunfight at the OK Corral. Breckinridge had pressed Wyatt for details about his time in Tombstone to add to the book. It was published the year before Wyatt died, and it depicted Wyatt as a thief, pimp, crooked gambler, and murderer. The book stated that the Earps and Doc Holliday aggressively mistreated the guiltless cowboys until they were forced into a fatal confrontation. His description of the 1881 OK Corral gunfight stated that the Clanton and McLaury brothers were merely cowboys who had been unarmed and surrendered, but the Earp brothers had shot them dead in cold blood. Wyatt and Josie protested the book's contest was biased and more fiction than fact. Earp complained about the book until his death in January of 29, and his wife continued in the same vein afterward. William McLeod Rain died on July 25th, 1954. Here again, only actually 5 months after Three Young Texans, and he was buried in Denver. Among his works are Wyoming, The Story of the Outdoor West, Ironheart, Beyond the Rio Grande, Run of the Brush, Clattering Hooves, Arizona Guns, a lot of short stories, And the screenwriter, though, is a different gentleman. His name is Gerald Drayson Adams, the screenwriter of Three Young Texans. He was born in 1900, passed in 1988, and was a former business executive and literary agent when he began writing for films in the 1940s. The Oxford University-educated Adams specialized in action-adventure and Western films. His films include Dead Reckoning, starring Humphrey Bogart, The Big Steal, Armored Car Robbery, His Kind of Woman, The Black Sleep, and Kissing Cousins, starring Elvis Presley, for which he received a WGA Award nomination. Adams also wrote for television series, including the pivotal episodes Hostage with James Garner and Jack Kelly and Stampede with Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. for Maverick, as well as The Savage Hills with Diane Brewster for the same series. The first story he wrote was actually for a Lucille Ball RKO picture called A Girl, a Guy, and a Gob. And then he wrote a screenplay called A Guy, a Gal, and a Pal. Yeah, this is how they rolled back then. And he also wrote other screenplays like The Lady from Texas, The Duel at Silver Creek. The same year as Three Young Texans, he also co-wrote the screenplay for The Gambler from Natchez, Princess of the Nile, and Taza, Son of Cochise, Chief Crazy Horse. Yeah. And the last film that he wrote was for the 1965 film Harem Scarum, another Elvis vehicle. And so those are the writers. And finally, the director of Three Young Texans is a man by the name of Henry Levin. He was born in 1909, passed away in 1980. He began as a stage actor and director, but was most notable as a director of over 50 feature films. Best known credits include Jolson Sings Again and Journey to the Center of the Earth, as well as Where the Boys Are. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he started directing movies in 1944 with movies like Night Editor and The Return of Monte Cristo. There wasn't any other titles that stuck out at me, though. 1962, The Wonderful World of the Brothers Grimm. Genghis Khan, he actually wrote the epic failure Genghis Khan with Omar Sharif. And his last film that he wrote, I mean, there was a 1980 television movie, but the last feature film that he wrote or that he directed was The Treasure Seekers for MGM. Mm-hmm. So the gentleman playing Jim Colt, Johnny's father right here, is a man by the name of Harvey Stevens. And he was born in 1901, passed away in 1986. American actor, initially known for his performance in Broadway productions. He was an avid competitor glider pilot, and he was inducted into the Soaring Hall of Fame in 1966 for his contributions to the sport. His debut in the theater came in 1920 at the Pilgrimage Play in Hemet, California. Following that, he toured for 2 years in a troupe headed by Walter Hampton and worked in stock theater companies in several cities. On Broadway, Stevens appeared as Sam Worthing in Other Men's Wives, written by Walter C. Hackett, late in 1929. Yeah, that sounds like a movie with that title that would come out in 29. He also appeared as Richard Wadsworth in Dishonored Lady, as Gail Redmond in Tomorrow, as Joe Fisk in The Animal Kingdom. Really good movie, one of my favorites of 1932. Fred Barton in Best Years, Bruce Blakely in The Party's Over. He also appeared in South Pacific, the stage version, as Commander Harbison alongside Mary Martin, and he's one of only 2 cast members who did not sing. Now, I just did the commentary for South Pacific yesterday, and we did talk about Commander Harbison, especially how James Michener uses him in the short stories, and then also how they use him in the movie. But very, very interesting. Absolutely. He also appeared in a 1938 movie called he appeared in The Texans, 1938, and The Oklahoma Kid, appearing in many, many westerns over the course of his career. Mm-hmm. And among other things like Maid of Salem, 1937, The Texas Rangers Ride Again. He was in Alfred Hitchcock Presents. The last movie he did was a 1965 Richard Chamberlain movie called Joy in the Morning. Yeah, that was the last film he was in. Mm-hmm. Lovely scenery, but I don't think I'd want to visit there. A little too dusty and probably a little too hot right now. Hell, it's probably twice as hot now than it was then. All right, why don't we talk about one of the leads now? We pretty much we've covered Mitzi somewhat. I mean, especially during the South Pacific commentary. So I didn't want to talk more about her in this one, and unless I have almost nothing else to say. But because we're going to be doing the rest of our other films, but let's do one of the leads right here. Tony Ballou is played by an actor named Keith Brazel. All right. Now, he was born in 1923, and he passed away in 1981 at the age of 58. Best remembered for his starring role in the Eddie Cantor story. He broke into motion pictures while serving in the United States Navy. His first co-starring role was opposite singing star Gloria Jean in the waterfront mystery River Gang in 1945. His dark chorus boy looks landed him featured roles in movies throughout the early 50s. He was groomed for stardom in the Eddie Cantor story, filmed in response to the wildly successful The Jolson Story, and Jolson Sings Again, starring Larry Parks as Al Jolson, one of Cantor's musical comedy contemporaries. There he is right there standing next to Mitzi Gaynor. Keith Brazell, that's his name. Standing almost a foot taller than the real Cantor and unable to convey Cantor's natural warmth, Brazell's performance became a caricature. The actor played most of his scenes with bulging eyes and busy hands, which was effective in the musical numbers but awkward in the dramatic scenes. Ultimately, Brazell's career did not launch as anticipated. In 1954, he was a guest on an episode of the Colgate Comedy Hour with host Gene Wesson as a promotional tie-in for the film. Brazell's other career highlights include appearances in the films Never Fear, 1949, directed by Ida Lupino, and A Place in the Sun, 1951, which is based on the very famous Theodore Dreiser book, An American Tragedy. And that movie had Elizabeth Taylor, Montgomery Clift, and Shelley Winters. Keefe in that movie played Earl Eastman. I haven't seen that movie in decades, to be perfectly honest. Brazell turned to nightclubs, where he appeared as a singer and a comedian. In 1961, an Edison Township, New Jersey nightclub owned by Brazell burned under some suspicious circumstances. Mitzi is the greatest distraction in the world, I'm telling you. She's a wonderful, wonderful distraction. Fire officials came across 6 empty cans of gasoline at the scene, while their caps and spouts were found separately in a paper bag. In the summer of '63, Brazell starred in a summer replacement series for the Gary Moore Show called The Keith Brazell Show. The program featured actress Ann B. Davis as herself in 3 episodes. A 21-year-old Barbra Streisand appeared on his very first episode on June 25th, 1963, promoting her first album. Brazell had a close friendship with CBS executive James Aubrey. Brazell started his own production company, Richelieu Productions, and Aubrey granted Brazell's company 3 television series without any previous script, pitch, or pilots. The insider chicanery resulted in a lawsuit against Aubrey and Brazell launched by CBS shareholders. There were rumors that Aubrey had no choice in the matter due to threats from the mafia, with which Brazell was known to be connected. During the 1964-65 season, Brazell's company produced 3 new but untested series, The Baileys of Balboa, The Cara Williams Show, and The Reporter, starring Harry Guardino. Those suffered from poor ratings. Aubrey was removed as president of CBS Television in February of '65 after a long court battle. And you knew these guys were going to duke it out eventually, but you didn't know it was going to be in a in a hayloft. Brazell later wrote a novel that was a thinly disguised account of his relationship with Aubrey and the network called The Cannibals, with B uppercased and the S in Cannibals a $sign in 1968, followed by a sequel called The Barracudas in 1973. In which he attacked several showbiz figures he'd worked with, including comedian Jack Benny. Brazell struggled to find work after his CBS experience and tried to relaunch his fading career as a self-styled modern minstrel recording artist. He signed on as a director of the low-budget sex comedy If You Don't Stop It, You'll Go Blind. I'm not going to talk about that. I have seen it, but I'm not going to talk about it. This was a feature-length parade of burlesque blackouts, double entendre jokes, and bawdy song and dance numbers. Brazell staged the musical numbers himself. Okay. And even appeared as a specialty act, embellishing his performance with Eddie Cantor's gestures and mannerisms. Oh, my God. Talk about hitting rock bottom. Oh, man. The film was booked into hundreds of theaters for midnight shows, and despite scathing reviews from mainstream critics, was very popular with college students. It earned more than $4 million. Keith Brazell died from liver disease in 1981 at the age of 58. He was also in an Esther Williams vehicle called Skirts Ahoy, which I've always been interested in. I haven't been able to watch that yet. But I just remembered, I have not seen If You Don't Stop It, You'll Go Blind. I've seen the other one that it's connected to that I had the film debut of Robin Williams in it, called "Can I Do It Till I Need Glasses." They just had no subtlety in the 1970s whatsoever, and the only thing I'm going to say about those movies is that they're basically, a string of sex jokes that were too dirty to televise in the mid 70s. Well, that's ultimately what happened to Keith Brazell. Yeah, but a colorful history though. A colorful history nonetheless. All right, now in the role of Sheriff Carter in this movie, Sheriff Carter is played by an actor named Dan Riss, and he was born in 1910, passed in 1970. He had a career from 49 to 65. His first movie was Pinky, directed by Elia Kazan and starring Gene Crane and also William Lundigan, who was the star of the movie I did several days ago called Down Among the Sheltering Palms. Dan Riss was also in The Killer That Stalked New York, Two Lost Worlds, Go for Broke, Little Egypt, Scarlet Angel, The Case Against Brooklyn, and his very last role was an uncredited bit as a radio announcer in Elmer Gantry, the famous film with Burt Lancaster. Now, the role of Bill McAdoo that we were talking about earlier was played by an actor named Frank Wilcox. And he joined the Pasadena Community Playhouse in December of 1924. And then he became a member of the Lambs Club. He became a contract player for Warner Brothers, beginning with the 1939 short film The Monroe Doctrine. During World War II, he served on a destroyer. Another film role was the circus doctor in the 1952 production of The Greatest Show on Earth, which won Best Picture that year. In 1951, already at work at the new medium of television, Wilcox was cast in 2 episodes of the police drama Racket Squad between 1952 and 1955. He guest starred 4 times in different roles on the television series The Lone Ranger. He portrayed John Gould on the religious show Crossroads, and he also played Duncan Glowry in the episode Bonnie Lassie of The Gale Storm Show. He appeared 3 times on the sitcom The People's Choice. He was also on I Love Lucy in the episode Lucy Wants to Move to the Country. He also appeared on the sitcom Private Secretary, George Burns in The Gracie Allen Show, Perry Mason, that kind of stuff. But he also did uncredited movies like Seahawk, They Drive by Night, River's End, Santa Fe Trail, Sergeant York. All these bits are uncredited, by the way. They died with their boots on across the Pacific. The Adventures of Mark Twain, Dark Passage, the Humphrey Bogart. He did a lot of Bogart movies. Out of the Past, that kind of thing. His last movie was actually the Disney movie $1 Million Duck in 1979, where he played a bank manager. that movie had Dean Jones, and it's actually considered one of the worst Disney movies. I think Gene Siskel walked out on it. Jamie, lovely to see you. How you doing? We are approximately 42 minutes into 3 Young Texans, 42 minutes. And like I said, the movie is available on YouTube. Now, time to talk about one of the familiar faces, one of the 2 that I mentioned was going to be in this movie. The gentleman on the right that we've seen throughout the movie, who plays the Dirty Snake Couture right there, that is a man by the name of Aaron Spelling. And if Aaron Spelling rings a bell, he is one of the most famous names in the history of television. He was born on April 22nd, 1923, so he would have been 100 if he had lived today. And he passed away in 2006 at the age of 83. His productions, his massive list of television productions include Family, Charlie's Angels, The Love Boat, Heart to Heart, Dynasty, Beverly Hills 90210, which I saw a few episodes of and I never wanted to watch it again. Melrose Place, Seventh Heaven, and Charmed. All those shows. That's not a joke. He also served as the producer of the Mod Squad, The Rookies, and Sunset Beach. He was born in Dallas, Texas. Here, he just got on the horse right here. And the gentleman on the left we'll talk about right after Aaron Spelling, because he's the other familiar face, the only other familiar face in this movie. But going back to Aaron Spelling, he made his first appearance as an actor as Harry Williams in Vicky, directed by Harry Horner in 1953, which was only 1 year before Three Young Texans. That same year, he appeared in the TV series I Led Three Lives and Dragnet, and Spelling appeared in episode 112 of I Love Lucy called Tennessee Bound. Oh my God, yes. That was Aaron Spelling. I didn't realize that until now. That's the one where they end up in Tennessee and Lucy and Ricky want to avoid running into Cousin Eddie, or Cousin Ernie, excuse me. So they end up speeding, they end up getting thrown in prison. Well, the very beginning of the episode, Lucy and Ricky, Lucy and Ethel drive up because Ricky and Fred are asleep in the back seat. And this gas station guy comes out. That's Aaron Spelling. Yeah. He sold his first script to Jane Wyman Presents in 1954, Three Young Texans, same year. He guest starred that same year as a dog catcher in the premiere episode of the CBS situation comedy Willie, starring June Havoc as a young lawyer in New Hampshire who later relocates to New York City to represent a vaudeville troupe. 2 years later, Spelling gained experience as a producer and additional credits as a scriptwriter working for Star Television on the series Zane Grey Theater, which aired between 1956 and 1961. Of the 149 episodes in that series, he wrote 20 of the teleplays and produced many others. Spelling produced Burke's Law while at 4-Star. The show was the first success for Spelling and pioneered multiple guest star format, later seen on The Love Boat and Fantasy Island. Thomas Spelling Productions was a television production company formed by comedian Danny Thomas and producer Aaron Spelling on April 15th, 1966, as a partnership with 24 properties. The company adapted its name by July 18th, 1966, when it announced the financial involvement of ABC with its first show called Range, later entitled Rango, a half-hour comedy western starring Tim Conway, and its rented space at Desilu Productions. Gower Lot. ABC also picked up another show for a pilot, just an outline treatment, in The Guns of Will Sonnet. Now, we're going to go back to Desilu Productions and in just a moment. Thomas Spelling Productions' active operations ended with the last season of the Mod Squad in 1972, and he formed a new partnership with Leonard Goldberg, Spelling Goldberg Productions. In 1965, Spelling began producing successful TV shows, including The Rookies, Charlie's Angels, Fantasy Island, Melrose Place, all that stuff, and I've already mentioned all the other ones. In 2004, Spelling was portrayed in 2 television movies. Dan Castellaneta, who voices, he's one of the voices on The Simpsons. He portrayed Spelling in Behind the Camera, The Unauthorized Story of Charlie's Angels. And Nicholas Hammond, who was in Sound of Music and also played the Spider-Man on television, he portrayed Spelling in a TV movie called Dynasty, The Making of a Guilty Pleasure. Oh, yeah. He also produced Dynasty with Joan Collins as Alexis Carrington. Wait a minute. It's hot enough here. I can't think about Joan Collins right now. Spelling married actress Carolyn Jones in 1953. She was in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and she played Marcia, Queen of Diamonds, in the Batman show and everything. When he was 30 and she was 23, but they divorced in 1964. On September 15th, 1978, Spelling was honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In 1983, he was accorded the NAACP Humanitarian Award for his monetary donation that permitted a 21-year-old's heart transplant operation. He died in 2006 at the Manor, his estate in Holmby Hills In LA, he was 83 years old. And let's see. He also produced a few films. 3 O'Clock High, Satisfaction, Loose Cannons, Soap Dish, and he was even one of the producers on Charlie's Angels and the Mod Squad movies that came out. But yeah, he was the gas station man in that Lucy episode. That's amazing right there. As Couture, yes. Now, the third and final familiar face is also the third lead, along with Mitzi Gaynor and Keith Brazell. And his name is Jeffrey Hunter, who plays Johnny Colt. Jeffrey Hunter is Johnny Colt. Known for his roles in such films as The Searchers and King of Kings, but he's also, and probably most well known for, playing Captain Christopher Pike in the very first pilot episode for Star Trek, which of course was produced by Desilu Productions, owned by Lucille Ball. Jeffrey Hunter was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, and after 1930, he was reared in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he graduated from Whitefish Bay High School. He was involved in school sports and began acting in local theater and radio. Here he is right here. That's Jeffrey Hunter. In his early teens, he worked for station WTMJ-FM and the Children's Theater of the Air, sponsored by the the Wauwatosa School Board. From 42 to 45, he spent his summers appearing in small roles, touring summer stock theater company from New York called the Northport Players. During World War II, Hunter served in the United States Navy. After the war, he attended Northwestern University, from which he graduated in 1949. Here, he was a member of Phi Delta Theta fraternity. In college, Hunter appeared in 2 NU stage productions, including Ruth Gordon's Years Ago. He also acted with the NU Theater Summer Stock Company at Eaglesmere, Pennsylvania in 1947. Hunter's first film came in 1949. While at NU, he was one of the number of students who was cast in David Bradley's version of Julius Caesar. The movie is best remembered today for starring a young Charlton Heston as Mark Antony. He graduated from NU on August 26, 1949, then moved to the University of California at Los Angeles to get his master's degree in radio. In 1950, he was appearing in a college production of All My Sons and was spotted by talent scouts from 20th Century Fox and Paramount. Paramount tested him, doing 2 scenes from All My Sons with Ed Begley. They were impressed, offered him an option. Darryl F. Zanuck of Fox heard about this and offered him a long-term contract. The young actor agreed, and the studio changed his name to Jeffrey Hunter on June 1st, 1950. Fox started off Hunter in a small role in 14 Hours, shot in New York City for director Henry Hathaway. He had a 2-minute scene in Call Me Mister, and then was given a bigger part in the all-male war movie The Frogmen for director Louis Milestone, supporting Richard Widmark and Dana Andrews. Among his fellow support players was Robert Wagner, another young male under contract at Fox at the time. 2 actors would appear in several movies together and were often rivals for the same part. Hunter was then a Campus Casanova in a Gene Crane drama called Take Care of My Little Girl, directed by Gene Negulesco, and we will be doing a commentary on Take Care of My Little Girl later this week. I have the book. I'm going to read the book, and we're going to do a commentary for the movie because Mitzi Gaynor is also in that movie, along with some other familiar faces. Fan response to Jeffrey Hunter's appearances was positive, and he moved into leading roles with Red Skies of Montana, billed third in a film about smoke jumpers with Richard Widmark. He had a more conventional male juvenile lead in Bells on Their Toes, a sequel to Cheaper by the Dozen, which reunited him with Crane. Marilyn Monroe later gave an interview where she discussed Jeffrey Hunter's appeal. Quote, "To me, Jeff is the acme of young American manhood. Why, he looks like he just stepped off a college campus. He's extremely handsome, but that is not what impresses me. He has a sort of, well, an all-encompassing type of magnetism, and he's a walking advertisement for marriage. You can't be with Jeff more than 2 minutes without realizing that he takes his marriage seriously and adores his wife and child. He talks about them constantly and with extreme pride. You would be certain to guess, even without knowing, that Jeff is the real athletic type. He likes to ski, especially, and can you think of anyone who would look better soaring down a mountain? That's one of the best Marilyn Monroe quotes I've ever read in my life. What do you think, Jamie? Can you think of anyone who would look better soaring down a mountain? Fox gave Hunter his first starring role in Lure of the Wilderness, 1952, a remake of Swamp Water, directed by Negulesco and opposite Gene Peters. After Dreamboat in 1952, Hunter supported Clifton Webb and Ginger Rogers. He was given his best role yet, the starring part in a war film called Sailor of the King, based on C.S. Forster's book Brown on Resolution. Although financed by Fox, it was essentially a British film with British talent. Hunter was cast as a Canadian to explain his accent. His casting led to some difficulties with British film unions. Sailor of the King was a minor success, as was a Western Hunter made with Mitzi Gaynor, Three Young Texans. So I guess it was. I guess it did make money. I didn't find any box office receipts on it, but Princess of the Nile was an Eastern with Deborah Paget in the title role. It was not particularly successful either, and Hunter did not manage to transition into being a top-line star. The title role in Prince Valiant, which had been mentioned for film, was given to Robert Wagner. It was a terrible disappointment to me, said Hunter. Later, I just didn't know what to do. It seemed like my career was over. They were making a lot of pictures on the lot, but I wasn't cast in any of them, and I couldn't understand why, particularly since I started out with such a terrific lot of luck, unquote. That's a particularly nice shot right there. Yeah. There are some very, very nice shots throughout Three Young Texans with the Durango, Colorado cinematography, I have to admit. And here again, this is definitely why this is more approachable than so many of the black and white westerns that came out at the time. Fox lent Jeffrey Hunter out to Allied Artists for Seven Angry Men in 1955 with Raymond Massey in the lead. Hunter then played an Indian chief in the western White Feather, essentially supporting Robert Wagner. It was a moderate hit at the box office. Hunter said after it, quote, I had no immediate picture scheduled. Nothing seemed to be coming up. I wasn't thinking of leaving my studio. It's important having a major studio behind you. It was just that I was restless and nothing seemed to be happening. With a friend, Bill Hayes, he set up a production company, Hunter Enterprises. They produced a documentary, The Living Swamp. Hunter also began appearing regularly on television, having particular success in an episode of Climax. Back at Fox, he supported Anthony Quinn in Seven Cities of Gold. He was lent to United Artists, along with fellow Fox contract players Wagner and Joanne Woodward, for A Kiss Before Dying. Wagner had the best role as a killer, while Hunter had the more conventional leading man part. A loan out to co-star with John Wayne in the title roles of the now classic western The Searchers began the first of three pictures he made with director John Ford, followed by The Last Hurrah and Sergeant Rutledge in 1959 and 1960. Hunter's career was revitalized when he successfully lobbied John Ford to cast him as the second lead in The Searchers. Disney borrowed him to play William Allen Fuller in the Civil War action movie The Great Locomotive Chase in 1956, opposite Fess Parker, Davy Crockett, better known as. Ironically, according to Parker's Archive of American Television interview, Ford had originally wanted to cast Parker in Hunter's role in The Searchers, but Disney refused to lend him out, something Parker did not hear about until years later. Parker referred to his lost opportunity as his single biggest career setback. Jeffrey Hunter also supported Robert Ryan in the western The Proud Ones in 1956. He then went over to Universal and supported another older star, Fred McMurray, in another western, Gun for a Coward, in a role originally meant for James Dean. Back at Fox, Hunter was reunited with Wagner as the James brothers in The True Story of Jesse James, directed by Nicholas Ray. Hunter played Frank. It was mildly popular, although considered a critical disappointment. Fox gave him another leading role in The Way to the Gold, another Western. It was a low-budget production, but proved profitable. He was one of several leads in Fox's Look at Young People. No Down Payment, also 1957, not a big hit, but the early work for director Martin Ritt received some critical acclaim. Fox sent Hunter to Britain to be an American star in a British war film once more called Count Five and Die. Then, sadly, Jeffrey Hunter became ill. He was meant to make a movie for Universal, If I Should Die, but collapsed on his return from Europe. He was replaced by George Gaynor. He was off the screen for 14 months while ill with what was diagnosed as hepatitis. John Ford cast him in another film called The Last Hurrah. Then he made a war film called In Love and War, Key Witness. And then he played Guy Gabaldon in the Allied artist movie Hell to Eternity, which was a hit in 1960. Then came one of his most famous roles. In 1961, Nicholas Ray, the director of Rebel Without a Cause, cast Hunter in the role of Jesus Christ in the $8 million epic King of Kings, produced by Samuel Bronston. Hunter said, quote, "I've broken my shackles at last." He told Luella Parsons, "Christ was a carpenter and 33 years old, and I'm 33, and I suppose my physical measurements fitted the description in the New Testament." Okay, that doesn't make any sense because from what I understand, there is no mention at all of Jesus's physical descriptions in the Bible. I mean, but then again, I haven't read it in a while. I thought there was no physical description whatsoever. Yeah. At the time of his death, he was robust and not a delicate man. It was a difficult part met by critical reaction that ranged from praise to ridicule because of Hunter's youthful matinee idol appearance. However, the film was a box office hit and remains one of Hunter's best remembered roles. Hunter later said, quote, "I still get an average of 1,500 letters a month from people who saw me in the film and share the beauty and inspiration I derive from it with me. There's some things that can't be measured in dollars and cents, and how can anyone put a price, even the price of $1 million career, on the role of the greatest being this mortal world has ever known?" When Hunter returned to Hollywood, he deliberately selected parts that were different, such as that of a psychopathic killer in an episode of Checkmate, and as the lead in a heist thriller Man Trap, directed by actor Edmund O'Brien. At Universal, Hunter starred in No Man is an Island, the story of George Ray Tweed, and he joined an all-star cast in the Fox World War II battle epic The Longest Day. He proved a climactic heroic moment playing a sergeant who was killed while leading a successful attempt to breach the defense wall atop Omaha Beach in Normandy. And then, finally, Star Trek. In 1964, Hunter accepted the lead role of Captain Christopher Pike, the first pilot episode of Star Trek completed in early '65. Hunter declined to appear in a second Star Trek pilot, requested by NBC in order to concentrate on film roles. He told the press, quote, "I was asked to do it, but had I accepted, I would have been tied up much longer than I care to be. I have several things brewing now, and they should be coming to a head in the next few weeks. I love doing motion pictures and expect to be as busy as I want to be in them." Later in 1965, Hunter filmed the pilot for another NBC series, the espionage thriller Journey into Fear, which the network rejected. And he did a few other films in the 1960s, including The Private Navy of Sergeant O'Farrell with Bob Hope and Cry Chicago in 1969. While in Spain in November of 1968 to film Cry Chicago, a story about the Chicago Mafia, Hunter was injured in an on-set explosion when a car window near him, which had been rigged to explode outward, accidentally exploded inward. Hunter sustained a serious concussion. According to Hunter's wife, Emily, he, quote, "went into shock. On the flight back to the U.S. after filming and couldn't speak. He could hardly move. After landing, Hunter was taken to Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles, but doctors could not find any serious injuries except for a displaced vertebra and a concussion. On the afternoon of May 26, 1969, Jeffrey Hunter suffered an intracranial hemorrhage while walking downstairs at his home in Van Nuys, California. He fell, knocked over a planter, and struck his head on the banister, fracturing his skull. He was found unconscious by his visiting friend Frank Bello and taken to Valley Presbyterian Hospital where he underwent brain surgery. He died at 9:30 the following morning at the age of 42. So yeah, his first role was an uncredited bit in Julius Caesar. Then he was in Take Care of My Little Girl, which we will do a commentary on very, very soon. And yeah, and then King of Kings, and then Star Trek. That's what he's primarily known for. And then you have Mitzi Gaynor, who, of course, was the song and dance sweetheart of Fox Studios. So an interesting trio. Certainly a very, very interesting trio. Here again, I just wish that Mitzi was in this movie so much more. I really do wish that. 90210 was up against Twin Peaks. I watched Twin Peaks and recorded 90210. Hashtag priorities. Yeah. Unfortunately, that was not my priorities. I saw Twin Peaks later and did like that, but never will go back to 90210. That's one zip code I will be avoiding for the rest of my life. So at any rate, we are at 1 hour and 4 minutes and 30 seconds. 1 hour, 4 minutes and 30 seconds into Three Young Texans, and we got approximately 10 minutes left to go. So I'd like to close out this review with some IMDb reactions. There's only 7 of them, so it's like, why not? Why not? We need to fill up the rest of this time. So the reviews are actually mixed, but surprisingly on the positive side. 9 out of 10, worth the wait. This was a very hard film to find. It took me years to track down a copy. I'm a big Jeffrey Hunter fan. In this film, Jeff overhears that some card sharks are trying to blackmail Jeff's father. The blackmailers plan to rob a train that has a federal payroll and force Jeff's father to join them with the robbery. Jeff disrupts their plans by robbing the train himself and puts the money in a safe place. His girlfriend, Mitzi Gaynor, and his buddy, Keith Brazell, find out what Jeff did. Keith decides what he wants to keep the payroll money for himself, while Jeff wants to return the money to the feds. Yeah, Keith joins up with the villains. Yeah. There's the plot in a nutshell. 5 out of 10. Average Western about 3 young Texans became involved in robbing, flights, and shootouts. This one is a cheap Western, mostly shot in Durango, Colorado, where during the 40s, 50s, and 60s were filmed several odors. That's a really, really long. Yeah. Rusty Rides the Range. There are actually several reviews here that are rated at 6 out of 10. I would say that's more appropriate for this movie. I think this is a 6 out of 10 movie. Like I said, it's that color cinematography that tips it above the rest. That's what it is. 9 out of 10, excellent Western on a small size, but the better for its unpretentiousness. 6 out of 10, Mitzi Gaynor is a cowgirl in a Western. Oh, she is. And 6 out of 10, Three Young Texans. This was actually written in 2023. When a routine poker game goes wrong, a card sharp is killed, and the man who did the shooting is coerced by the witnesses to take part in a train robbery, else they will not corroborate his story and he will doubtlessly hang. The thing is, his son Johnny hears their plot and decides the only thing he can do is rob the train himself. The plot only becomes more complicated when Rusty, Mitzi Gaynor, discovers the truth, and his friend Tony, who has ridden the loot, tries to double-cross him with Apache Joe. A bit too long and certainly predictable, but there are plenty of action scenes, horse chases, and shootouts. Here again, typical of all Westerns. Michael Ansara is usually reliable as a baddie, and together with an outing for Aaron Spelling before he knew Charlie or his Angels, is worth keeping an eye out for. Hunter and Gaynor are easy enough on the eye and work just well enough to keep this running through to the ending that actually has a very slight twist to it. It's about family, loyalty, and friendship, so never fear, a moral is never far away. And there's only one review online, courtesy of Jeff Arnold, at Jeff Arnold's West, a blog of a Western fan for other Western fans. This is what he wrote. You could certainly do worse. February 2nd, 2018. And like I said, this is Jeff Arnold's West. In 1954, Fox was moving to an all-cinemascope production schedule, and it contracted out its lesser efforts, such as the lowest budget westerns that were still popular. Leonard Goldstein's Panoramic Pictures reaped the benefit, and this was one of several color pictures, 12, financed and released by Fox, but made by Panoramic at the RKO Pathé Studios that resulted. I like it, actually. It's a straight-down-the-line skullduggery western with proper bad guys. Good old Michael Ansara's Apache Joe, leader of a band of Tex-Mex cutthroat outlaws, one of whom is a surprisingly good Aaron Spelling, then 30 years old, before he became a famous producer as the cadaverous Couture. The three eponymous youths are Rusty, top-billed South Pacific star Mitzi Gaynor in her only Western, the equally unwestern Keith Brazell. He actually had an uncredited bit in a Roy Rogers Odor as well, so was experienced by comparison to Mitzi, as the roguish Tony, and Jeffrey Hunter in his first proper Western. He had co-starred in Fox's semi-Western Lure of the Wilderness in '52, but that doesn't really count. With the rather B-Western or even spaghetti character name of Johnny Colt. So all three were Western neophytes. Rusty's dad is Morris Ancrum, solid as ever, so the cast isn't bad. Johnny's dad, Harvey Stevens, is a wastrel who crosses the Rio Grande to gamble badly in Mexican cantinas and is heavily in debt. It's a pretty rare picture, and it does not figure largely in TV schedules, but you can watch it on YouTube. There's nothing extra special about this Western. It's fairly standard fare, but it's done with panache and some gusto. There's some nice Harold Lipstein cinematography and stirring Lionel Newman music. The whole thing is competently directed by Henry Levin, who had been helming movies since 1944 and had done the Glenn Ford, William Holden, older The Man from Colorado. Worth seeking out, I'd say. So yeah, that's the only online review outside of IMDb, and so it's a positive recommendation. And like I said, I mean, the other reviews were actually, fairly positive in their assessments. Yeah, I will personally never see this film again, but at the same time, I mean, look, if you're a Western fan, I'd say check it out. If you're a Mitzi fan, I would say check it out. Although, just be aware that she doesn't appear very much in the movie. And Jeffrey Hunter. If you like Jeffrey Hunter, it's absolutely worth seeing as well. So it's it's. I mean, like I said, if insignificant sounds a little too harsh, let's just say it should be available for free viewing. It should be available for free anywhere you want to watch it. I mean, this is like an Internet Archive movie. It feels like something that's in the public domain now. And I think that unless they're getting some kind of restoration on physical media, that we shouldn't be paying for to watch these older movies unless the studio actually put some effort into it. And Three Young Texans was never released on VHS or DVD. And in fact, like I said near the beginning, that it hasn't been seen on television since 1977. So, but like I said, I mean, Mitzi, Aaron Spelling, Jeffrey Hunter, and the color cinematography, courtesy of Leonard Doss again. It's perfectly acceptable. But there's nothing about it that stands out. Let's see, I think we have only 2 minutes left. We have approximately 2 minutes left here. Just to let everybody know, I will be back on board at 6 p.m. to do the audio commentary for Irving Berlin's There's No Business Like Show Business, starring Ethel Merman, Dan Daly, Donald O'Connor, Mitzi Gaynor, and Marilyn Monroe. So that will be at 6 p.m. I'm going to finish this up and prepare for business right afterwards. So that's actually a really nice shot of Jeffrey and Mitzi together. 5,000 reward for the return of the payroll. Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, these guys, they were competing for her hand and attention pretty much the entire movie. Yeah, she's just adorable there. I jump on a horse for her. All I'm saying, I do that. Yep. So Keith Brazell dies, and so Jeffrey and Mitzi will probably now end up together. Mm-hmm. The only other actor I didn't talk about was in the role of Jeff Blair. He was an actor by the name of Morris Ancrum, who was born in 1896 and passed in 1964 at the age of 68. Signed with Paramount Pictures in the 1930s. And he was cast in supporting roles as stalwart authority figures, including scientists, military men, judges, trail hands, bankers, and even psychiatrists in more than 270 films. So that is Three Young Texans, produced in, released by 20th Century Fox, yeah, and produced by Panoramic Pictures. So I will see you all in a few hours for There's No Business Like Show Business. Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you again,